Well, hello everybody. Here we are once again at Seize Your Business. Jim Waszak, Success Enhancement, and Kevin O'Flaherty, your co-hosts. And today we have a very interesting guest, Jim Kapolas. Jim is with Payville, payroll service, and much more. And in fact, he's probably one of the more interesting people we've had because he's also been a car collector and a musician and a music collector. And the longer I talk to him, the more things I learn about. But today we're going to talk about an issue that a lot of businesses face, really all businesses face, is compliance. There's just so many different regulations and ways you can get in trouble that you need somebody like Jim to kind of keep you out of trouble.
And we're going to talk about how employee compliance specifically.
Employee, right? Yes, yeah. Thank you. See, that's why I have him here. But anyway, so Jim, why don't you just give us a little bit of your background and how you got into the payroll business and how that evolved to employee compliance?
Well, I'd be happy to, and thank you both of you for having me on the show. My background is pretty diverse, as Jim alluded to. I came from the entertainment industry, played the musical instrument, played in bands, eventually got out of the business and ended up at a place called Alpine Valley Music Theater, producing concerts. Went on and on to continue in that arena until my father passed away in 1980. And he and my mother had a very, very small payroll company. It was called Weekly Payroll Service, and they had maybe 30 small businesses that they would contact, bring the data to a big processor, and then that processor would create the checks, they would distribute them, and my mother and father carved out a nice little living at the time. He passed away in 1980, and I had no real estate planning, no insurance, and my mother was pretty much about 55 years old and left to go back to work. I was in the entertainment industry at the time, producing concerts at a place called Alpine Valley Music Theater, and like a good Greek boy, decided, geez, I think I better go home and make sure my mom's okay. So I came home and I learned the business, and my brother at the time was working for a Fortune 500 company called Frank B. Hall out in New York. They're like the Lloyds of London of aeronautical space equipment. They'd sell the insurance to the hull to one company. They would leverage the capsule to another company. And they eventually became a Fortune 50 company, and like most Fortune 50 companies, they are now defunct. But he ran their international payroll department and decided to come back to Chicago, and we built the company over a period of about 10 or 12 years into the 18th largest processor in America. We went through a couple of other machinations. We became the 12th largest processor in America, and then we decided to raise money to get to the public markets. We developed some web technology. We did what's called a reverse triangular merger with another entity and became the 4th largest processor in America. And we're managing the business. My brother and I took smaller interest in the company. We retired my mother, who I had originally come back from the music business to make whole, which was a nice success. It's always a good story to tell. And we were just waiting for the opportunity to get to New York to ring the bell to take the company public. We were being underwritten by Lehman Brothers. We were on the hot Hoover IPO list for months. So the stars were in alignment. My brother and I, we get the call, ring. Okay, Chris, let's go. We're going to the East Coast. We're going to ring the bell, sign the papers, on our way. We get the car. Drive to O'Hare, which is always a challenge, no matter where you are. We can't get into the airport, so we drive around to another entrance. It's blocked. We see police. We drive around and around. The airport is blocked, so Chris goes, "You better turn on the radio." We turn on the radio, and it was September 11th.
Oh my goodness!
What a story!
Yeah.
So obviously the belly falls out of the IPO market. At the time, there were companies that were going public with losses and business plans and all sorts of crazy stuff was going on. We actually had strong revenues. We had a solid plan, and we unfortunately got sucked in like a vacuum. You know, when that belly fell out, you could just hear that.
Wow, what lousy timing.
So we just went back to running the business, and about a year later, the company was sold to one of our publicly traded competitors. My brother and I, we took our non-competes, waited for about 4 years, and then we resurrected ourselves in a company called Paybill USA, and we offer human capital management to small and medium-sized employers, which ranges from payroll to time and attendance to electronic onboarding to performance management. And what we've seen is an incredible opportunity for businesses to really get hurt. The compliance issues that are starting to surround people range from, of course, the Affordable Care Act to lawsuits to harassment suits. And it just seems that as this country continues down the path that it's on, the regulation gets bigger, heavier, harder, and unfortunately, it used to be for the big Fortune 500 companies, publicly traded companies, large companies. It just seems to continue to drive itself down farther and farther to the small employer.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate because it's tough on a small business. But Joe, let me share a story with you. I remember years ago, this company I worked at, and I think HR reported to me at the time when I was CFO, and we had a person that we wanted to terminate, but we were smart enough to review it with our attorneys, and he came in and he says, "Look at these performance appraisals. You know, you're saying the guy's great. Now you want to get rid of him. It's going to be real tough." And I think those are the kind of things that particularly smaller businesses struggle with. Can you talk about maybe if you have any case studies or specific instances where somebody
Absolutely.
either got in trouble or you kept them out of trouble?
And if there was one place, and as an attorney you can probably attest to this, one place where an employer, especially a small or medium-sized employer, can get in trouble, it's with how they handle the transition of an employee's status. We approach it in that there's two arenas. There's the legal ramifications of a improper firing, which obviously in the state of Illinois, it's an at-will state, so you can fire anybody for anything at any time. But the ability to litigate or sue back the employer is massive. So that's one side. The other side of the equation is what's called state unemployment compensation. The Illinois Department of Employment Security has very rigid rules as far as what an employer has to be able to document to justify letting an employee go without that employee going to collect unemployment. And this is advice to all small business owners. Managing the rate that you pay for state unemployment insurance is huge in terms of the impact on your business. You could be paying as little as 0.8% of the first $12,500 you pay, or as high as 8.3%. The more employees you have, the higher it is. So to answer your question, I'd like to give people a very simple formula for what you need to do. Aside from hiring correctly, because if you terminate somebody because, let's say, they couldn't do the job, it was your responsibility to make sure they could do the job. So once you've done your due diligence, it's called progressive discipline. And it's a very simple three-step process. Number one, on any first incident of disciplinary action that needs to occur, you need to make a formal statement. It does not have to be documented or given to them in written form. It's good for you to document it, but you give them a verbal warning, letting them know that another warning could turn into a written disciplinary action. And if the activity continues, you then should have a sit-down formal meeting with the person, preferable to have a third-party witness in the room, and to deliver to them a document that articulates the recurrence of this issue and ask for a signature. In many cases you won't get one, but that's why you want a second person in the meeting.
As a witness, right.
And where you firmly tell them, okay, you were late for an hour, you didn't call once, I gave you a warning, twice it's written, and be very clear that if it occurs for a third time, termination is a very strong possibility. You've done the best you can for a small company that doesn't have the HR expertise of protecting yourself, not only from protecting yourself from state unemployment, but also from other litigation.
I had another experience where I took over a manufacturing operation. We must have had about 120 people in that operation. It was struggling. And in about a year, we got it performing spectacularly well. But we did replace about 25% of the workforce. And I was very happy that we never had any kind of claim, never any issue. We had a union, everything was done, procedurally correct. And one of the tools we used was attendance. We kept very strict attendance records because it's hard sometimes to prove if somebody's abusing alcohol or drugs, but usually that shows up in their attendance, and that's usually pretty hard to
That is
for somebody
excellent.
to
Excellent
object
point.
to. Yeah.
And I'll give you an example that validates your point. And we like attendance and easily measured dynamics or metrics for holding people accountable. We had a client, a restaurant, very high profile restaurant, and they had cameras everywhere, right? So they have a picture, they have on video an employee who's at the bar. He looks around, it's like after hours, goes behind the bar, looks around, and you can see him pouring himself some liquor, drinking it, puts it away, goes behind the bar into the freezers, goes to another camera, opens up the freezer. You see him go in, he's walking out, and you see him literally, lobsters and fillets in here, walks out. They terminate. Our state unemployment management service, we have a group that helps our clients dispute and protest those claims, gets a notification that they filed for unemployment. And the client said, well, he was stealing. Our experience has shown us that if you use that as your reason for protest, the state of Illinois is going to say, did you call the police? We have him on video. Did you file a report? We have him on video. Was he convicted in a court of law? We have a video. Well, unfortunately, he hasn't been proven guilty of theft.
Wow.
But the moral of the story is, and we suggest this to all of our clients, if they had a company handbook that said violation or unauthorized possession of company property is cause for termination, you would have just terminated them for unauthorized possession of company property, and they would have had no problem. So to your point, when you can find a measurable metric, and attendance is a very good one, many times, unfortunately, you need to be terminating them for things that fit into the program that the state of Illinois uses.
Right. Boy, the world just seems to get more and more bizarre.
So when you have an employee handbook, is it also pretty important to have your employees sign that employee handbook?
That would be mandatory, absolutely. And I suggest, though, to people that if they move to a handbook, and you could probably attest to this with your background in law, that be careful what you ask for, because now you need to hold everybody to that same standard.
Okay.
So within the handbook, you can't use it to treat one person according to the handbook and let somebody else not be held accountable. But yes, to your point, employees should review it upon employment, sign off, and there should be an acknowledgement that stays in their file that indicates they have read the manual.
So what, other than the progressive discipline and having an employee handbook, and a good one that probably want to have it reviewed by a professional,
an attorney, absolutely.
What else can you tell us about other tips for employee compliance that our listeners might want to hear about?
Well, I think to me, you really want to start with make sure you clearly understand whether or not that employee is capable of doing the job. A perfect example. I'll use Greek because I'm a Greek guy. Greek restaurant.
Sure.
Two of his waitresses walk out the door. The place is packed. He sees somebody that he knows used to work in the restaurant business. Do you want to work? Get in there. Go put on an apron and start waiting on people. Okay, she comes in, drops these plates, spills coffee on, and he fires her. At the end of the day, the state of Illinois is going to say very clearly that just because they couldn't do the job is not reason for you to terminate them. You should have never hired the person in the first place. So the onus goes back on the employer. So another tip would be to make sure when you hire an employee that you're prepared to make the investment in time, training, and money to make that person long-term part of your organization. That's another big tip. Um, I think another good tip now moving away from the state unemployment side and more into the legality of it, things like when you tell people in your organization that somebody's not there for the day, never divulge that they're sick or if they're out, none of their personal information. We have a process that we emphatically stress to all of our employers, OOO, out for the day. That's all that you need to put in the email. Jim's out, out of office, OOO. Never disclose anything
The
else
reason.
because that's immediately going to open up the opportunity for somebody to bring an action. The other thing too that we see is you'll get like people know the system, and I don't want to categorize people, but we see employers that end up terminating somebody, and the underlying feeling is this person knew all along where they were going to come at us or how they were going to benefit from being terminated. So, a good tip for employers is to make sure everybody that's going to interact with the employee has a chance to interview that person. Make sure you call the people on the resume, referrals. It seems old fashioned, it seems like a waste, but if you don't do your due diligence, you're going to end up holding the bag.
You know what? You make me think of a very interesting question because you said that the onus is on the employer to hire people who can do the job. But because of what you said, that employer can't really find that out because if he calls the previous company, they're only going to confirm dates of employment. How do you find that out in this world of people being, super protective of, their own exposure?
Very, very true. And the point that Jim's referring to is, and we do it too, if somebody calls up, our HR department only says we will acknowledge what the person has told you as accurate or inaccurate. You have to do some forensics. And I think it's a combination of verifying the information combined with your own testing. If you have somebody that needs to unload boxes or put stuff up on a shelf, you can't be afraid to verify that they're capable of doing that, either through and to me, it really should go to a very strong job description. Anybody that's another tip, because that's really the right question. The tip would be if you cannot put onto a piece of paper exactly what the job is that you want to hire somebody for, you are not in a position to hire them or validate that they're capable of doing the job. So it begins with a good, and I don't mean serve tables or pack boxes. You have to have it should be at least a page long from everything from the weights that they have to lift, any side jobs that they may have to do, any clerical work that's involved, any interaction with the customer, any interaction with vendors, so that if you can't pick up a piece of paper and read that job, you are not ready as an employer to hire somebody and feel comfortable that you can evaluate, do your forensics, and then be able to protest the claim in the event the employee doesn't work out. And you'll protect yourself from potential litigation.
Well, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Yeah, Jim, this is a fascinating subject. We could probably talk for hours. So if somebody, wants to just either has an issue or wants to make sure they don't, how do they, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Oh, PayvilleUSA.com. Our website is loaded with free, accessible information. Our telephone numbers are there, and feel free to ask for me personally, Jim Kapolas. But we have a very well-trained staff, happy to help, no fees, no charge. We're just happy to help employers navigate the labyrinth of compliance issues, and feel free to get on the site or give us a call.
And Mr.
Super.
Waszak, how can people reach
Yeah, you can. Best is just call me 630-272-3895. I have a website for the improv work I've been doing, improv-4-business. But I'm involved in a lot of things, and I have a big network, so just call me anytime. Kevin, you?
Hey, you can call my law firm, O'Flaherty Law, at 630-324-6666. We do free consultations. If you want to download any of the podcast episodes, either in audio or video form, it's all on seizeyourbusiness.com. That's seizeyourbusiness.com. And thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.